you're making more money than ever, then why is it that you're feeling like you're falling behind?
Yeah, they call that the middle class trap,
I
and
know.
I think we've really seen this some more apparent because of all the inflation that we've been having.
But also go to school, get a good job, get good grades, work hard, right? All that stuff, just that prescription isn't work.
Yeah, well, school really teaches you to be middle class. I mean, that is the point of school. The school does not teach you to be wealthy. It doesn't teach you to have money. It teaches you like how to have a job.
What does school really teach you about the economy,
Mhm.
about financial education, all the things that actually really matter. And there's always things growing and dying. And I think that to me is what people should be focused on, because those are real things. We're seeing the rise of AI. The technology is completely going to change the landscape of what's important, and what people can focus on. You got to stay ahead of this kind of stuff.
Well, I think that the middle class thing worked for a lot of people. I even think it works for the boomers right now. I think, you work, you get a job, you get a pension or a retirement, you buy a house, your house appreciates, you retire, and you have kind of enough money to live on. You're not rolling in money, but you have enough money to live on. But I'm not sure that that same formula works now today because of AI, but also because of inflation and also just because people aren't buying houses and doing all the things they used to do, and nor are they getting pensions.
Yeah, but I'll challenge you a little bit on that. I'll tell you why. Like, you obviously know my mom, and my mom now has been living off of Social Security. Well, Social Security is tied to the cost of living, or COLA, I guess they call it, and it's pegged. So it's, first of all, it's not very much, but secondly, it's tied to what I would consider to be an inflation rate that is way less than what's really going on, right? And so I've watched my mom on a fixed income completely fall further and further and further and further behind. And so when you start to take a look at, and by the way, when she retired, she didn't feel that way. Okay. So I watched it. And so one of the things I'm watching is, obviously it depends on how much money you have in the bank and all that kind of stuff. My parents had all that. And
Right.
so if you got $1 million, let's say, which is a lot of money, and you're sitting there and you feel like that's comfort, think about what $1 million is in 10 years.
Mhm.
Seriously,
Yeah.
it could be discounted by 40%, 50%, depending on inflation, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it could buy $500,000 worth of stuff, not a million like today, based on where the economy's going. And this is that middle class trap.
It
So
is, but I think that the biggest thing is that when you look at boomers that are middle class, it's not as bad because they have these pensions, and it's not as bad because, and Social Security, while not meeting inflation, is still available, and they all own houses. But imagine this next middle class
yes,
trap for these
that's a
next,
good point.
this next group of people, the millennials, where people don't own houses, people are paying rent, people are, squeezed, they don't have pensions. I mean,
That's a fair point.
you
No,
know,
the differentiator is the home,
mhm.
right? So correct. Like, but to me, a home is an asset that's going to be increasing with inflation. Looks like my mom, going back to my mom, that home she paid under 11 grand for, and still, it's a house I grew up in. They still own it. They paid it off years ago. Not understanding. My mom's a hairdresser. My dad was in construction, but they were just trying to have a home to raise their family. That was it. And then that thing's worth over 700 grand.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my point. Like,
Mhm.
a lot of people will cash out, and what will they do with that money? They potentially could pay capital gain tax, stick it in a bank. And that's
Mhm.
all I'm saying. I think you have to have that hard asset. Even if you throw a renter in there and you get some supplement your retirement income, you got to be careful. You should not cash out a hard asset and expect that it's going to do better in some savings account or bank account. And this, to me, is all part of that middle class trap. If you're trying to figure out what to do with your capital, your real estate, your business, your taxes, and the wealth that you've already built, you need to be at Limitless Expo this August. It's 3 days in Phoenix with 50 speakers. You'll hear from incredible operators like George Gammon, Tom Wheelwright, Jeff Snyder, Kathy Fett, Carl Yarber, me, and 50 other speakers who are actually investing and operating right now. Limitless Expo 2026, August 14th to August 16th in Phoenix. Grab your ticket before the next price increase.
Well, that's a good point. The middle class trap too is, and I almost fell into this if, we hadn't known each other, but basically you buy a house and you sell the house to buy a bigger house. And then you sell that house to buy another house. And all of a sudden you have this big house, but you don't own anything. Where, you had me keep my condo when I was buying my first house. And because of that, I made a lot more money than I would have if I would have sold my condo, 10 years earlier. And so I think that's part of that middle class trap too, is wanting that big house, wanting those nice cars, not really, keeping assets and holding on to them, but selling them to get something more.
Well, look at the narrative today. They call it the equity trap, right? Like we're talking about, when we saw everybody had this rise in home values, right? And they're staying put, right? Okay. So let's just talk about that. And there's articles about how many trillions of dollars sitting in there. You know why that is? It's because Wall Street has their eye on it. They want people to refinance. They want lines of credit. They want people to trade. They want people to sell that. And there's serious real value there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And what you did was you used a line of credit against your condo to buy your next house. So without selling, by the way, so there's no tax. You took a line against the one you owned, and then you paid that off.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that is the right way. What the wrong way is to sell, pay tax, and then go find something else.
And even if you don't pay tax because it's your primary home, you're still rolling that money and you're still not keeping that asset.
Somehow Wall Street has reached right into Main Street in every single way. They've done it through insurance policies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Invest in this insurance, this life insurance, this disability insurance, this term insurance. They've done it in pensions, right? You don't know how to invest, so we're gonna take money out of your paycheck, and we're gonna incentivize you by letting your employer double it, right? By the way, it's gonna have to go to this specific financial planner. We've shifted the responsibility of making your money and you actually managing it and watching it grow and understanding how it's going to grow. And then we completely eliminated it from any kind of education piece at all. And people have just kind of taken a back seat to it.
I do want to touch on inflation because inflation, it was never really a thing. Like I always say, like I went through '08, I was just getting out of college. And while the job market was awful, inflation was under control. So prices weren't spiraling up. I wasn't in that situation. Now you have these prices that are out of control. And so the inflation hits the middle class the hardest. It doesn't really hit the wealthy as hard because their assets and the stock market and everything else, metals, is all moving with inflation. But when you're in the middle class and you're relying on that paycheck, it does hit you the hardest day to day.
Of course it does. Yeah. I mean, think about, I guess, what are some of the habits of the middle class?
Mm-hmm.
One of them is starter home, a little bit nicer home, bigger home, biggest home, second home, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like they just, and by the way, that same thing with cars. They also go the same thing with, trinkets and all these little things that, they need to keep up with the Joneses on. To me, that's the middle class trap,
Mm-hmm.
right?
The credit cards, the
Yep.
living exceeding
Yeah.
your lifestyle limit.
Yeah. Wealthy look at money very extremely differently, right? They look at how their money is working for them. And I think that's just a little bit different mindset. And I would say one of the biggest issues with the middle class, I just got done kind of beating the drum on, and that is just completely turning your money over to someone else, and also being completely reliant on a system that does not really reward you. We're heading into this period of time where unemployment is a little more uncertain than it was for a variety of reasons. AI is coming after call it the white collar, middle class jobs. That call it that middle. It's kind of the rise of the blue collar right now.
Mhm.
You're
Yeah,
not,
because AI
you're
can't
not
touch those.
you're not going to AI a plumber or an electrician or that kind. Those are pretty safe. I think the middle class is at the most risk.
Mhm. Well, that's the problem really, like, is in our economy right now, there is a middle class, but there in a lot of countries, there's not a middle class, and our middle class is getting smaller. It's hard to
Yeah.
actually have a true middle class situation right now.
And there's only so many hours you can work to try to keep up.
Absolutely. And so really, to try to get out of that middle class trap, you need to really remove yourself from the spending. Like how much do you need to spend? Do you need the newest car? Do you need the newest phone? Do you need the newest house? And then beyond that is then obviously investing.
Yeah, and I would say not only obviously spending. I actually hate to focus on that personally. I mean, me,
But
like
it is a big issue for
I
people.
can't disagree. I mean, for a lot of people, the Dave Ramsey method is correct, right? No debt, watch your spending. I actually think that you should focus on your income, and then you should live the lifestyle that you want, and that is the way to wealth. Because if you control your income, then you have a lot more possibilities than if you're just trying to manage your expenses based on what the economy's doing.
Yes. But I also think that if you increase your income and then you increase your spending, then that just is fulfilling, that.
Nope. I didn't say that. What
Yeah.
I said is you have more control over if you understand how to make money, if you understand how to generate income, maybe multiple sources, maybe to figure out a way to make more of where you're at, whatever it is, if you can grow your income, you're going to get much, much further than if you're just trying to manage your expenses and cut your expenses.
I agree. I think you just need to do a little bit of both. And
Agreed.
but do you think that, moving, it's hard right now because it's harder for people to kind of move out of that middle class, you
It's
know.
extremely hard. Well, look how you did, and
Mhm.
you are on your way, right? And when I said I think you should keep your condo, and I think you should get a line of credit against it, and I think you should put a tenant in there and keep it. Think about the decision you made there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
how many people would not have done that? A lot.
Most, I'd say.
I
Yeah.
think most. For some reason, you did it. Okay, and it worked. And that little condo, that thing soared for years, right?
Yeah.
And
It was
then you
great.
used it, and you sold it. Now you've moved it on to something else, and now you understand how money works,
Hmm.
how you're moving it around. You're looking at how, imputed equity, how much equity you have, how much it's making, what the return is, where it should be, what the economy's doing. You're looking at prices, you're looking at rent, you're looking at cash flow, you're looking at all the things that you never knew before,
Yeah.
right?
Correct. Yep.
And you learned on your own, but now you just kind of have an open mind to it all, right? And
Absolutely.
now, isn't it like, don't you think differently?
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah, because of all the wealth that I've generated from just owning assets over the past 11 years is how I look at it, how I look at
Oh,
how wealth has grown. In fact, I wish I had more and I had bought more before, 2020 because I would have made more money. But it's what, that passive income is what's going to accelerate you from the middle class into more of a wealthier class. And this trap people fall into is, they're trying to keep up with the Joneses, but the Joneses are still in a bad financial situation. They just have a lot of stuff. I mean, that is one thing I think it was really good for me. I worked at a bank for like 4 years, and the most interesting thing to me from working there was you could have a lady come in deck to toe in designer, you think she's so wealthy if you would just see her in the town. But then when you look at her account, she's coming in because she overdrafted her account and she has 3 overdraft charges and she's upset at you because the order that things came out, and her line of credit's maxed out on her house, and, she's just her bathtub is like totally full, right? And then you see this other lady totally unassuming. Literally, I remember this lady works at Subway, has $30,000 in her savings account, has her mortgage that she's, paying. And so you just never know what situation people are in. And it was a really good lesson for me because what I realized from working there is that you really never know what someone's financial situation is. You might think that they're rich. You might think that they're poor. You might think that you have more money or less money than them, but you really don't know because it's really about how they spend their money, not about how much money they're actually making.
Let's fast forward. I mean, you got a degree and you went into education. You became a teacher.
Mhm.
All right. So, like, that is the system. You weren't getting the money that you needed to do your job, and you started bartending in the summers. The money that you were protected apparently by the union, and the money you were putting away went into a teacher's pension,
Mhm.
all managed by someone else. So
Mhm.
just think of the situation you were in.
Yeah.
And you think you're safe because you've got a union protecting you, you've got a pension apparently protecting you. But really, what opened your eyes was what? When you went into the free market on those few months that you had off, and
Mhm.
you're like, holy moly, right?
Well, I was working 2 to 3 jobs while teaching as well, so it wasn't just the summers
Okay,
because
but
you
just
make no
think
money.
of the
But
craziness around that.
yeah, no, you do, you realize it, and then when I started my own company and I was hiring teachers to work for me because they needed that extra income and they needed, because when you're in the system, you're so wrapped up in it and everyone around you is wrapped up in it and you're not thinking any bigger because you're thinking about how everyone else around you is thinking.
Well, that's my point. So this is, to me, that's middle class.
Mhm.
That typifies everything about the middle class. And I remember the story you told me that you were in some kind of meeting with was it the principal of the school, and they were like, and you kind of he told you how much he was making or something, and you're like,
Yeah.
you're like, what? That's all I'm gonna make
Yeah,
in
that's what
20
I'm
years.
gonna aspire to. If I get a master's and work at this job for 10 or 15 more years, I maybe can be a principal and that's it. And yeah, it just was very underwhelming,
Yeah, and
especially in Arizona.
I think that's actually what we're fighting here. To
Mhm.
me, that's core middle class.
Mhm.
It's a philosophy, it's a system. Hey, you're taken care of. You got a great job. You remember you also said to me that you had no clue until you saw your first paycheck of what the actual salary actually really meant on a net basis.
Right, because you don't take out, taxes and
All the stuff,
insurance and
right?
all the things, and you're left with this paycheck. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was making more than this in my college job working part time than I am now as a teacher full time. But you don't think about that because when are going to make 34,000 a year in your mind, you're like, that's a lot of money, but it's not.
And it's not taught. You right? And
Yeah.
so all that stuff, pounded on you. Thankfully, you made some decisions in that first couple of years. I'm just saying this is like a deflection. This is a delineation point for a lot of people. You looked at that scenario and you said, hell no, right?
Hmm.
Okay. A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't have that courage. Remember, you moved home and your dad was so pissed?
Hmm.
Because he's like, you just went through all that and got a degree, and so you have the family pressure, you have the financial pressure, you have all your friend pressure, and all the people, and they're all looking at you like, are you out of your mind? Why are you leaving this teacher's job after this long journey? And I just want to bring this up because to me, that's the road to middle class.
Well,
And
it was helpful that I was making very little money. I think some people get more trapped when they're making more money and they're living more
I
comfortably.
agree with that.
Hmm.
Right? And you start to realize all these things are working against you. You're going to be met with inflation, just like my parents were, just like I was, and just like future generations of my kids will be. And so you have to act appropriately. And as get whatever money you get, you just need to understand how it works. If it's sitting in a savings account, you're going to lose purchasing power over a period of time. These are all things that are not new. This is not under Trump. This is not under Biden. This is the way it's been. This is the way it's going to be. And that's all. You just need to open your eyes a little bit and make some really, really, really good moves.